Hello folks, welcome to the geometry video on analyzing conditional statements. Now I said in the last video when we talked a little bit about in class how there's going to be a lot more writing involved in this section because we're starting to deal with logic. Um, this is kind of a big section, so make sure you're taking notes, make sure you understand all these concepts. I'm going to throw a lot at you here that we will try and clean up as much as we can in class. Um, make sure you understand all these things, ask questions, because there is a lot to this. Hopefully, a lot of this makes sense, but we'll get into it as much as we can here. Talking about conditional statements, negation, converse, inverse, contrapositive, equivalent statements, perpendicular lines, and biconditional statements. Okay, and I got old Billy Shakespeare here just because there's so much writing involved. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. A conditional statement is if-then form. Okay, if it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky. Notice the if and then the then. If-then form. This is how we write conditional statements. If it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky. Okay, now when we start talking about the hypothesis and the conclusion. The hypothesis, oh, let's go new color here. The hypothesis is the if part. If it is raining, okay, that's the hypothesis. So logic would conclude that the conclusion is the then part. Then there are clouds in the sky, okay? Hypothesis, conclusion. If it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky. Okay, so now the next thing we have to do is talk about how to write a conditional statement. Okay, so let's take a look at these two. Uh-oh, did I lose all my? Nope. Let's take a look at these two statements. All birds have feathers. How would we make this into an if-then? Well, you'd go like this. If an animal is a bird, oops, comma, then it has feathers. Okay? If an animal is a bird, then it has feathers. I made all birds have feathers into an if-then. If an animal is a bird, there's the bird part, then it has feathers, the feathers part. What's my hypothesis? Well, my hypothesis is the if part, if a bird is an animal. And the conclusion is then it has feathers. If it's hypothesis, then it's conclusion. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. Two angles are supplementary if they are a linear pair. So how would we write this as an if-then? If two angles are supplementary, then they are a linear pair. Okay? That's a true statement, but I'm taking a sentence. Two angles are supplementary if they are a linear pair, and making it into an if-then, a conditional statement. If two angles are supplementary, then they are a linear pair. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Move on to the next thing. Negation. Negation is the opposite of the original statement. The opposite. So if the original statement is the ball is red, the negation of this is the ball is not red. Okay? Now, if the statement is the man is not tall, the negation of this, the man is not tall, is the opposite of this. So that would be the man is tall. Okay? Don't get confused. Just because it says negative doesn't mean it has to have the word not in it. It is the opposite of whatever the statement is. So if the man is not tall, the opposite of that, the negation of that is the man is tall. Okay? Don't get those confused. Negation means opposite. Opposite. Okay? Converse. For dealing with a converse, you exchange the hypothesis and conclusion. Now we're going to deal with three different ways to manipulate a conditional statement. Okay, back here we started with the conditional, if-then form. Once we have it into this if-then form, then we start manipulating it. Okay, and we have to write the converse, and it'll make sense later on in this video why we have to do that. Okay, so what I have to do here is I have to decide what the converse, or what the hypothesis is. Well, it's if it is raining. That's the hypothesis, and then the conclusion then must be, then there are clouds in the sky. So if I'm going to switch these, if I'm going to exchange them, it's going to sound like this. If there are clouds in the sky, then it is raining. Now, I didn't say it had to be true, because obviously this is not true. If there are clouds in the sky, then it is raining. But this is the converse of the statement, if it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky. Okay? Converse, switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. That is the converse. Switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. Check my time again. Okay. Inverse, negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. This is the inverse. Okay, so the converse, we switch them. With the inverse, we negate them both. So we do the opposite of whatever they say. So let's take our same statement again. So we're going to take the hypothesis, if it is raining, and negate it. If it is not raining, then there are not clouds in the sky. If it is not raining, then there are not clouds in the sky. Okay? I just took each statement, if it is raining, and I negated it. If it is not raining, okay, then there are clouds in the sky, then there are not clouds in the sky. Inverse, negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay? Contrapositive. Write the converse, then negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the first thing I have to do is I have to write the converse, which if we go back here, converse, exchange, hypothesis, and conclusion. So I'm going to switch the hypothesis and conclusion, and after I've switched it, I'm going to negate it, so I'm going to make them opposite. Okay, so this is going to be, if there are not clouds in the sky, then it is not raining. See, we switch the hypothesis. If it is not raining is now, then it is not raining, because I had to make it negative. I had to negate it. Not necessarily make it negative, but negate it. If it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky. The contrapositive, we switch the hypothesis and conclusion and negate both. If there are not clouds in the sky, then it is not raining. Contrapositive. Okay? We're flying through this. We're in good shape. Equivalent statements. If we start looking at each of these, and we start looking at what each one of them means, what happens is your original conditional and the contrapositive will always be saying the same thing. They will be equivalent. They will be equivalent. Okay? Similarly, the inverse and the converse will always be the same. So what I want to do is take our original. I want to do, just want to point these things out. So this is obviously the original conditional. Oops. Play with my font here. Okay, that's the conditional. The inverse is, actually, let's do the contrapositive, because those two match up. Contrapositive. Okay. Positive. Okay. If it is not, or no, excuse me. If there are not clouds in the sky, then it is not raining. Now these things say the same thing. If it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky. If there are not clouds in the sky, then it is not raining. Those are equivalent statements. They say the exact same thing. Okay? Now let's try converse and inverse. The converse, now here's another thing that people get confused on. When you're writing the converse, you go back to the original conditional every time. So the converse of if it is raining, then there are clouds in the sky is, so this is the converse, if there are clouds in the sky, then it is raining. Okay? So the inverse, again, we go back to our original conditional up here. Okay? And the inverse then is we negate both of them. So if it is not raining, then there are not clouds in the sky. Okay? If there are clouds in the sky, then it is raining. Is that necessarily true? No. If it is not raining, then there are not clouds in the sky. Okay? Does that make sense? Equivalent statements. The conditional goes with the contrapositive. The inverse goes with the converse. And we'll do more examples of this. This is spelled out on page 80 of your book. All this conditional stuff. Okay? Now, they throw this in here, kind of a weird place in the book to talk about perpendicular lines, but we're going to talk about the notation. The notation is like this. Okay, so if you want to tell me that line segment A, B is perpendicular to B, or to, we'll go D, E, this is how you would do it. This symbol here means perpendicular. Okay? That symbol there means perpendicular. This is in the blue box, the key concept on page 81. Okay? What are the definition of perpendicular lines? Perpendicular lines meet, let's draw some perpendicular lines here. Perpendicular lines meet at a right angle, 90 degrees. Hopefully we all knew that. Hopefully that was review. But this is the symbol you use to say that two segments are perpendicular. Okay? Time-wise, we're doing okay. We're getting close. A biconditional statement. Biconditional. Here's what you need for a biconditional. The conditional statement and the converse are both true. If that happens, you can write it as a biconditional. And you use if and only if. So let's take a look at this. Here's my conditional. If two lines intersect to form a right angle, then they are perpendicular. Is that true? Yes, it is. We just talked about it. So if I write the converse, I switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. If two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form a right angle. Is that true? Yes, that is true. So how would we write this? As a biconditional, it would look like this. Two lines intersect to form a right angle if and only if they are perpendicular. Okay? There is your biconditional statement. Notice it does not start with if. It is a sentence. Two lines intersect to form a right angle if and only if they are perpendicular. Okay, that is only if the conditional and the converse are both true. Okay, so let's review. A conditional statement is if then. Negation is the opposite of whatever it says. Converse, switch the hypothesis and conclusion. Inverse, negate both the hypothesis and conclusion. Contrapositive, switch the hypothesis and conclusion and then negate them both. Equivalent statements, conditional goes with contrapositive, converse goes with inverse. Perpendicular lines obviously meet at a right angle. Biconditional statements, if the conditional and the converse is true, you can write it as a biconditional using if and only if. Okay? If you need to go through this video a couple times, that's what it might take. Hopefully this makes sense. I know that's a lot to throw at you. We'll review it again in class, but hopefully we can get a handle on this. Okay? And we will see you in class.